first of all, it looks like I'll be talking to Jesse Lee Peterson soon. Isn't that rad? We're going to be doing an interview over call. He wants my opinion on the riots. We'll see how that goes. I know it's amazing. Amazing. So we'll get that again. That'll be fun. And I also want to talk to you guys about something that means a lot to me. I want to talk to you guys about defunding the police. Now, I know what you're thinking. Defund the police. What is this abstract, meaningless, virtue signaling call to action? Like, it's like saying abolish the police. Now, you can say abolish the police all you want. And you when you say it, your dick gets hard, it feels great. But what does it actually accomplish? What does that actually mean? You just want to abolish the police? I mean, that's kind of impractical, don't you think? Like our entire criminal justice system, the courts too. Like the police are the police bring people to the courts. Abolishing the police right now, probably maybe not the most practical, immediate response to our criminal justice problems. I know some of you people are memeing and creaming over here. You're saying yes, but that'd be like saying because the president is a shit, we need to just get rid of the presidency. I know we may have some vermin supreme stands right here, but I assure you that that is at once impractical and would not solve the problems that we are looking to solve. Nor, mind you, would getting rid of the police right away, because the police, as we all know, are a gang, and if you vacate a gang from their territory, what do the other gangs do? Has anyone ever watched any movies? Ever? It's a power vacuum. I'm serious about that. I really am. I know that sounds facetious, but if you just get rid of the police right now, the issue is the total absence of the police would only function in a society with a civic structure strong enough to support the criminal needs of the populace without the existence of an authoritarian police agency. Right now, we're not at that point. And I do feel like if we abolish the police right now, we would only end up creating a vacuum for a less accountable agency to end up doing their job. So with that, now, this isn't long-term goals. I'm talking right now. But I say right now, defund the police. Let me talk to you about why. Okay? The police get a lot of money. A lot of people don't actually realize how much money the police get. For example, in the city of New York, and this is just me doing some quick Googling over here, you know. In the city of New York, the NYPD get in the ballpark of 10% of the city's budget. That's about $6 billion. The beat. It's a lot of money. Now, normally I wouldn't just show you some off-the-cuff article here. The actual reason I'm doing this is because I wanted to show you this little graph. Why am I showing you this graph right here embedded in the article rather than opening it in a new tab? Well, because the person who made this image and embedded it is stupid. I have no idea what kind of formatting error could possibly cause this. So we're going to look at it in the article. But this is true. I double-checked all this. It's just a nice graph. For every dollar that goes to the NYPD and corrections, other agencies get 29 cents to homeless services, 25 cents to the Department of Health, 19 cents to housing preservation and development, 12 cents to youth and community development, and 1 cent to workforce investment. Weird. You think that's bad in New York? The LAPD, $3.14 billion spent on the police. Now, that's not all discretionary spending. A lot of that is for stuff like pensions and healthcare, which the city can't just stop giving money to. But that is in the ballpark of what is the budget of the city of Los Angeles? Man, I butchered that Angeles, didn't I? $10.6 billion, which means that the police spending represents nearly a third of the city's expenses. Since 1977, the amount that our country has spent in total on policing has nearly tripled, with adjustments for inflation. But what's interesting is the tripling of the inflation-adjusted expenditures for police have more or less kept pace with the overall increase in state expenditures, meaning they're keeping track with the GDP. But I ask you something, my friends, and I am very, very curious. Back in 1977, we spent about 4% in total, with just across the board, state and local governments, on police. And today, it's about the same amount, because the GDP has gone up. What over the past 50 or so years would justify the police budget raising with our GDP? Since the 1990s, crime is at a record low. Violent crimes in this country have plummeted to like less than half what they used to be. So why is it necessarily the case that police spending has to increase proportionally in the way that it has? Well, a lot of the police spending that we have engaged in has not gone to the types of tactics and resources that actually lead to a decrease in crime. For example, one of the largest spikes in police spending over the past 20 years has been police departments buying up surplus military-grade weaponry from our military, following its obsolescence or following its, replacement in, our various and ongoing wars in the Middle East. And that's why you've been seeing so many of these pictures and videos going on lately of like police, like literally just like 8 of them riding on the back of like these fucking like, I know they're not really tanks, but like these armored cars that are running down these plated like holy shit. Yeah, APCs or whatever. Well, I got called out in that stream recently because I said something's an APC and it turns out it was actually a slightly different type of APC. But like we're looking at the protests. We've seen what's happened here. Are the protesters bringing anti-tank rifles? Maybe I've missed the videos. When I look at all the BLM protests, I don't see people like lining up on rooftops with like 50 caliber like explosive rounds that can penetrate through like an APC like car door or something. I don't really see that. Protesters are actually specifically taught to engage in tactics that are meant to minimize police crackdown, which, I mean, for all the good that does, American police don't really need an excuse. So why are we spending that money? Why are we spending billions of dollars on the acquisition of military hardware for civilians? Police are civilians. You realize that, right? They're not military. They're not. They don't go through the same training. They don't have the same oversight. Police are civilians, just like you and me. Police go through about the same amount of training you could expect a plumber to go through. Less, actually. For a plumber, you actually need certification from a trade school, to my knowledge. The military, you have to commit to, not so severe are the restrictions placed on military personnel, and I'm not saying the military is a great place, but I'm just trying to do a juxtaposition here. The military are subject to an entire separate legal system. The court-martial. They have an entire extra set of laws guiding their behavior. They have fewer rights than we do because they have committed themselves to an institution which carries within it the power to do great harm to people, very often without due cause. And there are consequences that come with that. And while the military may not always, be made subject to the consequences they probably deserve for all the fucking war crimes we've committed over the past 30 years in the Middle East, at least those systems exist for the police. They really don't. And yet we give them about the same armaments the military get. We don't even have to rely on these being deployed directly to police. Over the past 48 hours, unmarked, apparently unaccountable military personnel have begun to run through Washington, D.C. Have you seen news reports on this? All these like the actual city of Washington does not want these people here. But the city of Washington, D.C., is nonetheless being flooded by these apparently federally accountable agents, these police/military personnel, these mercs, these thugs. Where's their court? I'm sorry, where are their badge numbers? Explain to me exactly. What happens if these people abuse the rights of American civilians? What do we do? What's the road forward from there? The answer is I don't know. And I don't think anyone knows. And I think a lot of people are really scared right now. And fundamentally, a lot of the problems that we're having right now with the police force is that they're not acting like police forces. They're acting like an occupying military force. They're taught to believe that civilians are the enemy. They are made unaccountable for many of the crimes they commit. They disguise themselves. They go undercover. They use unmarked police cars. They'll cover their badge numbers. They'll cover their names. They're given secondhand military weapons, but not given proper training on how to use them. They're not given proper resources on how to de-escalate situations or appropriately respond with force to situations which could potentially be resolved without resorting to violence. All they're given is a gun, a badge, and a fuckload of authority. And an extreme interdepartmental social pressure to not rat out the bad behavior of their compatriots. The police don't need the money they're being given right now. It's not going towards the protection of the citizenry. It's going towards the inflation of the police force into a military force, or I guess a paramilitary force, that every city can use with minimal oversight to resolve any domestic conflicts they have within their jurisdiction. They don't need that money. Here's what I'd like to see when I say defund the police. Let's really think about it for a second. First of all, we probably do not need the number of police officers we have in most cities. I would be willing to bet that is the case. And the reason why I am fairly confident that is the case is because police should be designated towards one specific thing: to bring the hammer of the law down on people where there is danger present. That is what the police should do. And they should do that. If there's a murderer or a rapist or somebody running amok, if there's somebody with a gun in a building holding a hostage, I want the police there. I, an anarchist, I want the police there in this society right now. I want the police right there. I want cop cars rolling up outside that building. I want them all doing the cop thing where they all hide behind the cop cars with the guns pointed. And then the guy with the loudspeaker goes, "Get your hands up!" Because they can't talk properly. I don't really know. And then they resolve the situation. I don't know. Murderers, rapists, I think the police, fairly reasonable for them to respond to these things. The majority of police calls do not go to major crimes like these. They do not. They do not. They sit in speed traps. They patrol poor neighborhoods looking for suspicious-looking people. They show up at domestic disputes. Warm in here. They interfere in problems that would be better resolved by a social worker. Can you think for a second? Mental health checks are done by the police. Can you explain to me why mental health checks are done by the police? Can you explain to me why exactly, if a homeless person is acting off their rocker, or a person's freaking out and threatening suicide, why do 10 cops show up? What about 2 social workers and 1 cop? Why? Do you remember Etika? The Nintendo streamer? Do you remember his mental breakdown? Do you remember how a little bit before he killed himself, he had a mental breakdown and the police were called to his place and he recorded from his window the police outside and there were like a bunch of cop cars? Can you explain to me why the cops are the ones who should be sent to that situation? I'm sorry, are cops trained on mental health crisis resolution? I know the answer to that. I already know the answer to that. Why? Why? Why not social workers? Social workers could do like 80% of the things that cops do right now, from mental health check to checking up on people, which is a huge part of like police responsibilities, to responding to like civic complaints or civic disputes. Why do we need to send police officers if like a neighbor is complaining about another neighbor and there's no conceivable threat of violence? What? Why exactly? Why exactly are police officers needed for traffic violations? How many traffic stops end in a fucking shootout between the police officer and the person who's pulled over? How many? Right now, you know what job? There are many jobs that are significantly more dangerous than being a police officer. Isn't being like a construction worker more dangerous? Guys, I know I've seen stats on this. Yeah, miner's more dangerous than just about anything. Lumberjack, you know, there are a lot of jobs. Pizza delivery, yeah. Fuck it, arm the pizza delivery people. If you think that a police officer needs a fucking gun to respond to domestic disputes, why the fuck does a pizza delivery boy not need an AR-15 to go delivering to bad neighborhoods? Explain to me. Why is every pizza delivery truck not rigged up like the car at the end of Breaking Bad when Walter put the LMG in the trunk and had it remote activated? So if things go south, the pizza boy can duck to the ground and hit the button and the neighborhood can be spread. Why? It's reasonable. A pizza guy invented the current bulletproof vest. I mean, when necessity calls. So much of the work that could be done right now by social workers, done better, done cheaper, done with better training, done with better oversight, could be done by social workers. So much of the money that goes right now towards the police can go instead towards civic programs that actually reduce the amount of crime going on. It has been proven that, for example, every cent you put into the investment of free contraception in a given area, like having free condoms available at like this government building or that government building, money put into education on the use of contraception, pays back 7 or 8 cents down the line. Do you know why? Because it turns out if you put it's even higher, if you put $1 million into a city to encourage people to use contraception, you save a fuckload of money on all the goddamn oopsie babies that come out 9 months after that program would have gone into action, who then need to, especially if we're talking about poor areas, which means we get tax benefits towards the mothers, which means that the food stamps need to include like the baby now, which means that they're going to grow up and probably be on welfare themselves, and which means they have a high degree of criminality as well, because oopsie babies correspond pretty heavily to dad doesn't stick around, certainly in some communities. Little investments early on in the health of a city contribute exponentially to the health of that city long term, to keep the population healthier, happier, more educated, and to keep our response forces more capable of meaningfully dealing with the problems of the city. But we don't do that right now. We just play the law and order card every single fucking time, even though right now we are going through record low major crimes, record low violence in this country. We just pump more and more money, more and more military hardware, less and less training, into these police forces, and we get nothing for it. Nothing but the constant suppression of our right to assembly and right to free speech, nothing but the vampiric leeching from our tax dollars, nothing but the knowledge that we are contributing towards the development of a police state. So I say defund the police. How much? How about we roll it back bit by bit? How much goes to LAPD? $3 billion, about 1.8 of which is discretionary. How about we roll that back to 2.5 billion, huh? How about we cut down that discretionary spending from 1.8 to 1.3? That's a huge dip. That's $500 million that can go into social programs. How about that? I'd be okay with that. I used to live in LA. I'd be fine with that. I'd go make that argument to the police precincts over there right now. I'd do it. I'll don't tempt me. I'll fly down there. Some of the cops that I knew from high school probably are still, I'll make that argument. Of course, I grew up in Beverly Hills, which isn't actually the city of LA, but whatever the case may be, these are changes that we need to make. We need to make them now. And I'm happy to say that in light of these BLM protests, there are some mayors who are considering severely cutting down on the budgets of their police departments. Don't do this to me. Minor point, maybe traffic violation should be dealt with by cops because there needs to be some kind of state authority to back up a fine or a stop. Well, the social workers still have state authority. That doesn't change. If you get stopped by a social worker, they can still put your info and your holy shit, fuck off. What do you... Jesus Christ. If you're stopped by a social worker, they can still put your info down. I don't see why the person who stops you at a traffic stop needs to have a fucking weapon. Anyway, Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti announced he is throwing out plans for a massive police budget hike as support for slashing police department funds grows amongst activists in the wake of George Floyd's death. How much is that actually going to pan out? I don't know, but that's a really good first step. And as somebody who knows a lot of people who still live in the city of LA, a lot of them are poor, I can tell you for a fact that any step towards the defunding of the police is a step that they would very much be in favor of. I thought a hike was an increase, throwing out plans for a massive police budget hike. So the plans for a hike are being thrown out. There we go. We've cleared up the misunderstanding. Do you guys remember back in 2014, 2015, after the Eric Garner killing, the New York Police Department, like a spoiled group of children, more or less striked? Police can't actually strike. They're not legally allowed to strike. But they were like, well, we're not going to go patrolling. We're not going to do any more proactive policing. And then nonviolent crimes went down. Do you know what proactive policing is? Follow-up question. Have you ever seen the movie The Minority Report? Or is it just Minority Report? Is it The Minority Report or just Minority Report? What does proactive policing mean to you? Just Minority? Okay. Really think about it. Proactive policing. So you're policing before a crime is committed? Is that a good thing? Is that something we should be doing? Maybe? Possibly? Proactive policing is the philosophy of settling in a neighborhood like an occupying military force and doing everything in your power to scrape from that community every conceivable offense you could possibly arrest somebody for. Proactive policing is having an income of $26,000 and stepping outside of your townhouse in the shittiest part of New York every single morning and watching as a police car rolls by and a fat white man with hairy arms rolls down his window to stare at you as he mows by at 15 miles an hour. That's proactive policing. Proactive policing is the philosophy that the people who you are policing are an enemy force, and it is your responsibility to extract from them the greatest conceivable number of criminal offenses you can possibly record, to have no regard whatsoever for the health of the community, but instead to care only about the number of arrests you can brag about and jerk off to the memory of at the end of every month. It's cringe. It really is. And the New York Police Department stopped doing it, and nothing bad happened. So maybe we shouldn't be doing that. And hey, listen up. If New York City's crime rate didn't skyrocket with the NYPD not engaging in proactive policing, it'll work in other cities too. Because New York City is a fucking hellhole. New York City is a goddamn crime bonanza. Huge city. But why did it go down? Violent offenses, major crimes like rape, arson, grand larceny, murder, that kind of stuff, those didn't go down. The police would still respond to the police being called. But people, if the police are only coming when they're called, they're only going to be called for major offenses for the most part. But many of the minor offenses police would arrest people for were offenses the police would go out of their way to look for. People don't call the fucking cops on some kid smoking weed like outside the door in the apartment block next door. That's what the police roll by and catch. So in the absence of police departments squatting on these communities to look for offenses, fewer people were arrested. The fewer people are arrested, the less damage long-term is done to the community. And seeing as how the occupation of the police hasn't seemed to have had any effect on these minor crimes they keep seeming to catch, it doesn't seem to me there's any benefit in engaging in police practices which increase the arrest rates for those offenses. Police reform is very complicated, and a huge amount of study would probably need to be done on the extent to which you can reduce the funding of the police without damaging the community. And I'd be interested in seeing that. But for us to see that, we need to see cities step up and work against the police unions, work against the tough on crime citizenry, and actively work to defund the police so we can genuinely test how effective that strategy is. Because right now, the argument seems pretty convincing to me.